Chapter 1: Strangers in the Dark. Crossel's taloned fingers flexed as he scanned the dense, oppressive jungle around him. The air was thick with the smell of decay and the faint hum of unfamiliar life forms. Somewhere in this labyrinth of vines and fog, the humans were waiting. Deathworlders, they were called, beings forged in the crucible of hostile environments. This planet, coated in layers of toxic flora and shrouded in an endless twilight, was a hellscape to most. But to these humans, it was home turf. A hiss crackled in Crossel's earpiece. "Commander, the men are uneasy. They claim they hear whispers." Crossel growled, his mandibles clicking with irritation. "Tell them it's just the wind. Deathworlders are not sorcerers. They bleed like any other." He knew the words were hollow, yet he needed his troops to believe them. He needed to believe them. The Asliel were renowned across the galaxy as ruthless conquerors, mercenaries who took on contracts others wouldn't dare touch. But something about this planet, with its haunting silences and unnatural shadows, gnawed at his nerves. He reminded himself of the mission: capture the Deathworlder strike team that had decimated an entire Asliel battalion just 2 days before. High Command expected results, and Crossel was determined not to return empty-handed. A sudden, bone-chilling chant echoed through the dense mist. It was guttural, rhythmic, human. His troops froze, and a palpable tension settled over the squad like a thick blanket. Crossel swallowed hard, the sound digging into his resolve. A simple war chant, yet it seeped into the crevices of his confidence, making him acutely aware of every shadow around him. "Humans," he muttered to himself, half in frustration, half in awe, always defying reason. In the shadows above, Lieutenant Aaron Hale observed the alien formation through a crack in the dense foliage. His team had been watching the Asliel for hours, studying their patterns, assessing weaknesses. These aliens, though formidable, were out of their element here. Aaron allowed himself a small, grim smile. This was no longer a battlefield. It was a hunting ground, and they were the hunters. "Aaron," a voice whispered over his comm. It was Lana, his tech specialist. "They're jumpy. I think the chant got to them." "Good. Let's keep them on edge," Aaron replied softly. His voice was calm, almost clinical, as he surveyed the group of Asliel below. Each one of his team knew the stakes. These Asliel mercenaries were veterans, accustomed to quick, brutal victories. But here, on a death world, raw power alone wouldn't be enough. Aaron signaled to his team, and they responded in silence, moving like shadows across the canopy. Every member was a specialist. Each understood the terrain, how to blend in, how to become part of the night. Hale's squad was trained to use fear as a weapon, just as much as any blade or firearm. Down below, Crossel was issuing commands, his voice barely steady. "Form a perimeter. Eyes on every angle. If one of you so much as sees a shadow move, alert the squad. No heroics." "Commander," one of his soldiers muttered, mandibles twitching nervously, "why don't we just leave this cursed place?" Crossel turned on him, his eyes flashing with suppressed rage. "Because," he snarled, "if we retreat, the humans win. They need to be reminded of their place in this galaxy." His voice dropped to a growl. "Fear is their weapon, but we are Asliel. We do not bow to it." Yet, even as he spoke, Crossel felt the prickle of doubt creeping into his mind. His troops were alert, yes, but their fear was a palpable thing, hovering like the mist around them. The humans' reputation for resilience, for unpredictability, wasn't just myth. It was becoming terrifyingly real. From his vantage point, Aaron observed the alien commander. He'd studied the Asliel's military tactics, their disciplined formations, their ruthless efficiency. But here, he could see the cracks. It wasn't just the alien physiology that made them different. It was their minds. They were unused to the unknown, to the visceral, primal nature of death world warfare. They expected battles, not mind games. "Time to introduce ourselves," Aaron whispered. "Lana, on my mark." Below, a sudden burst of static erupted in the Asliel's comms, followed by distorted human voices. Voices speaking in alien tongues, layered with jarring distortions that clawed at the nerves. Crossel's soldiers twitched, looking around wildly as Aaron's team manipulated the alien tech to throw their senses into disarray. "Steady!" Crossell bellowed, trying to regain control as panic flickered in his squad's eyes. He clenched his fists, feeling his authority slip second by second. These humans, they weren't merely soldiers. They were predators. In one swift movement, Aaron signaled his team, and they unleashed a silent assault, smoke grenades and silent darts, picking off Crossell's soldiers in the dark one by one. The Asleal, in their confusion, could only watch as their numbers dwindled, fear blossoming like poison. "Crossell, is it?" Aaron's voice crackled over the comms, smooth and unflinching. "Welcome to our world. I'd suggest leaving while you still can." The alien commander stiffened. He searched the mist, desperation etched on his face. "Show yourself, Deathworlder." Aaron's laugh was low, a sound that echoed through the canopy like a whisper on the wind. "Maybe tomorrow, but today we're shadows. Ghosts. You're not on an Asleal ship anymore, Commander. You're in our domain." Silence fell, and Crossell felt the weight of it pressing in, thick and suffocating. His soldiers were scattered, bewildered, afraid. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He was outmatched, not in firepower or numbers, but in something much more primal. Here, on this toxic, hostile world, the humans held the upper hand. As the shadows reclaimed the jungle and the last of the Asleal disappeared into the mist, Crossell's breath quickened. For the first time in his career, he understood true fear, the fear of Deathworlders. And somewhere above, Aaron watched him fade into the darkness, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. Chapter 2: The First Strike. The jungle had grown quieter. Too quiet, Crossell thought, eyes darting around the clearing. His warriors shifted uneasily, sharp eyes scanning every shadow. The humans hadn't attacked in hours, and the silence was as unnerving as any ambush. His soldiers looked to him for answers, but he was fresh out of reassurances. "Commander," his second-in-command murmured, a nervous click in his mandibles. The men grow restless. They sense something. This world, it has a way of creeping into one's thoughts. Crossell clenched his fists, his patience thinning. "We are Asleal. We do not cower at shadows. Keep your senses sharp, and we will root these Deathworlders out." He tried to inject confidence into his tone, but the tension around them was thick, as though the very air had turned against them. Above, hidden in the thick canopy, Lieutenant Aaron Hale observed the alien squad's tight formation. He raised a hand to signal his team, each movement calculated, silent. From his vantage point, he could see the fear etched into the aliens' rigid postures, their sharp glances cast into the shadows. Hale knew that Crossell's team was reaching its breaking point. He intended to push them over the edge. "Aaron, their comms are wide open. Do you want me to?" Lana's voice crackled softly in his earpiece. Aaron's lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. "Yes, Lana. Make it count." Below, Crossell's earpiece crackled with sudden static. Then, layered beneath the interference, came faint whispers in an alien dialect, phrases that only made sense to Crossell's troops. Distorted voices murmured their names, recalled events from their pasts, and spoke of home worlds they thought they'd left far behind. One soldier, a hulking Asleal with a scarred face, faltered, his eyes darting as he clutched his weapon tighter. "It's a trick," Crossell barked, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "They're just trying to unsettle us. Stay focused." The whispers grew louder, now punctuated with low, chilling laughter. Crossell felt his chest tighten. He was beginning to understand why his superiors had warned him about humans. They didn't need brute force. They were turning his soldiers' own minds against them. Aaron watched the Asleal shift nervously, and with a quick hand signal, he and his team slid down to ground level. Moving like shadows, they positioned themselves in a crescent around the aliens, hidden by thick vegetation. Aaron counted down, and with a silent nod, his team unleashed smoke grenades. Thick, inky plumes engulfed the Asleal, obscuring their vision and sending them into disarray. "Fire in bursts," Aaron whispered to his team. "No noise." make them doubt what they're seeing. Shots came from all directions, rapid and precise. Crossel's soldiers stumbled as they tried to fight back, firing blindly into the haze, their panic mounting with every lost comrade. Aaron's team darted in and out, silent and lethal, their forms vanishing as soon as they appeared. "Commander, they're everywhere," one of Crossel's warriors yelled, firing frantically into the mist. Crossel's frustration boiled over. "Hold your positions. These humans can bleed." But even as he said it, he knew that the humans weren't playing by his rules. They were phantoms, haunting the periphery, breaking his team down one by one. "Commander!" Crossel's second-in-command had fallen back, his voice barely a whisper. "They're not like other prey. They move as if they're part of this cursed place." Hale, hidden behind a massive tree trunk, listened to the fragmented cries over the Asleal calms. His face was calm, his eyes focused. His team was dismantling the alien squad with precision, yet he felt no thrill in it. These were soldiers just like him, trapped in the machinery of war. But they'd come to a death world, and here, survival meant adapting or perishing. "Aaron," Lana's voice murmured in his ear again, Crossel's breaking. "We could close in, make them surrender." Aaron considered this. Surrender was hardly in the Asleal vocabulary, yet he was aware of the strain on his team, too. Even Deathworlders had limits, and his squad had been moving nonstop, skirting danger with every calculated step. He pressed his calm, close the net, but hold fire. Let's see if they'll give up. He knew it was a gamble, but pushing his enemy to their psychological limits was a tactic that had paid off before. As the smoke thinned, Crossell saw glimpses of his dwindling squad. Their eyes were wide, their weapons clutched as if they were talismans against the phantoms stalking them. For a moment, he considered ordering a retreat, but his pride, his status as an Asleal commander was on the line. "Show yourselves," he roared into the mist. His voice echoed, hollow and unanswered, swallowed by the dense jungle. In response, Aaron stepped forward, allowing himself to be seen for a fleeting moment. "It's over, Crossell. Your squad is outmatched." His voice was calm, as steady as the earth beneath them. "There's no need to lose any more lives." Crossell clenched his jaw, rage flashing in his eyes. "We don't surrender, human. Not to anyone." But even as he said it, the last of his resolve cracked, and his eyes betrayed a shadow of doubt. Aaron nodded, noting the defeat in Crossell's stance. "Then we'll finish this. But know this, Crossell. Every soldier you've lost today has been your choice. I offered you a way out." With a last, mournful look at the ragged remains of his squad, Crossell turned, accepting that his mission had failed. But he would not forget, and he would make sure that others remembered the humans who had haunted the jungle that day, who had wielded fear like a weapon sharper than any blade. Aaron watched them retreat, his team lowering their weapons as they dissolved back into the shadows. He allowed himself a moment to breathe, feeling the weariness settle into his bones. The jungle fell silent once more, its dark trees bearing witness to the encounter. Lana's voice broke through the silence. "They're gone. We did it, Aaron." He nodded, but his face remained somber. "For now. But they'll be back." And somewhere deep in the jungle, the first sounds of the night began to stir again. Chapter 3: The Echo of Defeat. The jungle lay shrouded in darkness, its natural hum punctuated only by the quiet breaths of Aaron Hale's team. They had retreated to a small grove, far enough from their encounter with Crossell's squad to allow a moment's rest. The dense foliage served as both their shield and their burden. Aaron knew that the Asleal would regroup, and that this battle was far from over. Lana crouched beside him, her face lit by the faint glow of her communicator as she scanned for transmissions. No movement from the Asleal. "They're quiet," she reported, her voice low. Aaron nodded, his gaze distant. "They'll report back to their higher-ups. If they're not moving, it's because they're waiting for reinforcements." Lana's lips pressed into a thin line. "You think they'll send more?" "They don't take losses lightly," Aaron replied. He scanned the faces of his team, their expressions mirroring his own, hardened, yet laced with the weariness that came from fighting an enemy that kept pushing forward, no matter the odds. A slight movement caught his attention. Gregor, the youngest member of the team, was hunched against a tree, his face pale. Aaron approached him, crouching to meet his eye line. "You holding up, Gregor?" he asked quietly. Gregor forced a smile, though it faltered. "I didn't think they'd be like that, sir. They don't stop. It's like fighting shadows." Aaron placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "They're trained for it, but so are we. Remember that." Gregor nodded, taking a deep breath. Aaron knew the fear was real. It gnawed at them all. But fear, controlled and sharpened, could be turned into strength. He had no intention of letting it dominate his team's resolve. In the distance, the silence was broken by a faint, rhythmic thudding. Aaron's team tensed, listening. The sound grew louder, closer, until the ground beneath them shivered with each beat. It was unmistakable. An Asliel dropship, sleek and heavily armed, making its way through the dense jungle. Aaron's mind raced. Reinforcements were closer than he'd anticipated. "Lana, how far are they?" She glanced at her scanner. 2 clicks southeast. "They're moving fast. They're not taking any chances this time," Aaron muttered. He surveyed his team, reading the fatigue in their faces. "All right, we can't face that dropship head-on, but we're not running either. We're Deathworlders. This is our territory." He motioned for his team to move, leading them deeper into the thickest part of the jungle, where the canopy would provide the best cover. The Asliel might have advanced technology, but Aaron knew the terrain could be a powerful equalizer. If they played it right, they could make the jungle itself their ally. As they pressed on, the jungle grew thicker, the trees towering like silent sentries. Each step was careful, controlled, Aaron's senses on high alert. Behind him, Lana spoke softly, her voice barely a whisper. "They're splitting into teams, sir. Looks like they're trying to flank us." Aaron gave a curt nod. "Good. That'll stretch them thin." They continued moving, weaving through the dense undergrowth until they reached a spot where the terrain dropped steeply into a ravine, its edges lined with thick, tangled vines. Aaron motioned for the team to stop, signaling for silence as they waited, crouched low in the shadows. Moments later, the sounds of a Asliel movement grew closer. Through the thick foliage, Aaron spotted the glint of alien armor. They moved with precision, but he could tell they were tense, their movements betraying an underlying fear. The jungle was unfamiliar to them, and Aaron intended to use that to his advantage. He signaled his team, and in a synchronized motion, they slipped into the shadows, dispersing to surround the Asliel's position. Each of them took cover behind trees, blending seamlessly with the terrain. Aaron took a steadying breath, letting his senses sharpen in the silence, feeling the pulse of the jungle around him. With a swift hand signal, Aaron gave the order. His team struck, rifle silent, as they picked off the Asliel scouts one by one. The aliens barely had a chance to react, their cries muffled as they fell to the jungle floor. But even as they gained the upper hand, Aaron knew this was only the first wave. The ground trembled again. A second dropship had landed. Aaron cursed under his breath. The Asliel were escalating, bringing reinforcements in waves. He was outnumbered, his team outgunned. But he also knew that numbers weren't everything. "This ends one way or another," Aaron murmured to himself. Turning to his team, he spoke, his voice steady but urgent. "They're throwing everything they've got at us. We hold our ground here. This is our last stand." Lana's face was grim, but her eyes were resolute. "Understood, sir." Aaron took position, and his team mirrored him, readying themselves as the new wave of Asliel soldiers advanced. The jungle seemed to hold its breath, the silence thick with tension. He could see the determination in each of his soldiers' eyes. They'd come this far, and they weren't about to let the Asliel take their ground without a fight. The first shot rang out, piercing the silence. Then another, and another, until the jungle was alive with the sounds of battle. The Asliel pushed forward, relentless in their assault, but Aaron's team held their ground, using the dense foliage to their advantage, darting in and out, their shots precise and lethal. In the heat of the firefight, Aaron's mind worked at a furious pace, analyzing every move, every angle. His team's ammunition was running low, their energy dwindling, but their resolve held firm. They were Deathworlders, after all, survivors forged in the most hostile environments the galaxy had to offer. As the battle reached its peak, Aaron saw Crossell himself, leading the charge with a look of grim determination. Their eyes met across the chaos, a silent understanding passing between them. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a clash of wills, a battle for respect. In a final push, Aaron signaled his team to fall back, drawing the Asliel deeper into the ravine. The terrain shifted beneath their feet, the ground unstable from recent rains. Aaron saw his opening. "Lana now," he shouted. With a swift motion, Lana triggered a concealed charge, the explosion echoing through the jungle. The ground beneath the Asliel force gave way, and with a resounding crash, Crossell's remaining soldiers tumbled into the ravine, the jungle closing around them like a shroud. As the dust settled, Aaron scanned the ravine, noting the scattered, defeated forms of the Asliel. The jungle was silent once more, as if satisfied with the outcome. Lana approached, her face streaked with dirt, but her eyes bright with triumph. "They won't forget this." Aaron nodded, a weary but victorious smile crossing his face. "No, and neither will we." As they regrouped, Aaron couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was only the beginning, that the jungle and the Asliel would remember their fight. But for now, they had survived, and in the end, that was victory enough. Chapter 4: The Final Stand. Aaron's team emerged from the jungle, moving cautiously. They'd won the last skirmish, but the jungle, now thick with shadows and a tense silence, felt like an enemy lurking in wait. Though the Asliel's forces had retreated, Aaron knew better than to believe they'd given up entirely. The Asliel didn't take defeat easily, and their pride had likely been bruised by the Deathworlders' resistance. Lana, her steps light yet wary, broke the silence. "We're almost at the extraction point," she said, eyeing the dense wall of vines ahead. "But we're exposed out here." Aaron gave a grim nod. "That's what worries me." He glanced around at the rest of his team, his gaze lingering on Gregor. They were all worn, scratched, and bruised, but determination burned in their eyes. Just then, a faint humming sound filled the air. Aaron's heart sank as the vibration grew louder, morphing into a low rumble that reverberated through the ground. Gregor, visibly tense, clenched his fists. "Sir, that sounds like—" "More dropships," Aaron confirmed, his jaw set. "They're coming back with everything they've got." The team pressed into the cover of thick trees, taking shelter as the dropships approached. Their engines whined like wounded beasts, and the rumble grew louder until the vessels touched down just beyond the tree line. The Asliel soldiers disembarked, their silver armor gleaming in the sparse sunlight filtering through the canopy. Aaron counted 3 full squads, each armed with heavy weaponry that made the earlier encounters look like practice drills. Aaron turned to his team, his voice low but urgent. "We don't have the firepower to take them head-on. Our only advantage is the terrain and the fact that they think they've got us cornered." Lana's eyes glinted with understanding. "You have a plan?" Aaron's gaze swept across the trees, the dense undergrowth, and the narrow gorge that lay just to the north. "We're going to funnel them into the gorge. It's narrow and steep. Only a few can come through at a time. It'll level the playing field." Gregor's expression wavered. "And if they just bomb the gorge from above?" Aaron placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "That's a risk we'll have to take. But if we stay here, out in the open, we're as good as dead." With swift, silent gestures, Aaron led his team toward the gorge. The jungle was alive with sounds. The rustle of leaves, the distant calls of creatures stirred by the impending clash. Aaron could feel the pulse of the jungle in his veins, a primal force urging him forward. Every fiber of his being told him that this was their last chance. They reached the edge of the gorge just as the first wave of Asliel soldiers breached the tree line. Aaron and his team took cover, positioning themselves to create a choke point at the narrowest part of the pass. The Asliel advanced in a disciplined line, their movements precise, but Aaron could see their hesitation, their reluctance to dive into a territory that was unknown, that had already swallowed so many of their kind. Aaron raised his weapon, his voice steady as he called to his team. Hold your fire until they're in the gorge. We hit them hard and don't give them a chance to regroup. The Asliel soldiers entered, their footsteps echoing against the stone walls of the ravine. They were close now, close enough that Aaron could see the flicker of doubt in their eyes, hear the faint hum of their powered armor. He waited, counting the seconds, feeling the tension coil within him like a spring. Now! Aaron's voice rang out, and his team opened fire in unison, their shots precise and deadly. The narrow gorge amplified the sound of gunfire, creating a cacophony that reverberated through the jungle. The Asliel staggered, their disciplined ranks thrown into chaos as they struggled to maneuver in the tight space. Bodies fell, their silver armor marred by scorch marks and blood. The initial ambush was devastatingly effective, but Aaron knew it wouldn't last. The Asliel adapted quickly, their commanders barking orders that cut through the chaos. One squad broke off, attempting to climb the sides of the gorge and flank Aaron's team. Lana spotted them first, her voice urgent. "They're trying to get above us?" Aaron didn't hesitate. "Gregor, take Lana and intercept. Don't let them get the high ground." Gregor and Lana moved swiftly, climbing the rugged cliffside with practiced efficiency. Aaron focused his fire on the remaining soldiers below, every shot carefully aimed. But he could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on them, the relentless tide of Asliel soldiers wearing away at their defenses. Just as the last of the Asliel in the gorge fell, a loud, piercing whistle sliced through the air, a signal flare, bright against the shadowed sky. Aaron's heart sank as he realized its meaning. Reinforcements. Again. "Fall back," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "We can't hold this position." They retreated up the gorge, their movements desperate but controlled. As they scrambled over rocks and through dense vegetation, Aaron caught sight of Crossel at the far end of the gorge, watching them with a look that was equal parts frustration and admiration. Crossel raised a hand, signaling his troops to halt. Aaron and his team stopped, breathing heavily as they faced off with the Asliel commander across the ravine. Crossel's voice echoed through the gorge, powerful and clear. "Deathworlders, you have fought with honor. More than I expected." Aaron met his gaze, his eyes hard. "We didn't come here for your approval." A slow, almost reluctant smile spread across Crossel's face. "Perhaps not, but you have it all the same." He paused, his gaze sweeping over Aaron and his team. "We have lost enough today. I will not dishonor my soldiers by sending them to certain death." With a signal from Crossel, the Asliel began to withdraw, their disciplined ranks retreating back through the jungle. Aaron's team watched in stunned silence as the enemy soldiers vanished into the trees, their footfalls fading into the distance. Gregor broke the silence, his voice filled with disbelief. Did we just win?" Aaron let out a slow breath, feeling the tension release from his shoulders. "Not a victory in the way we're used to, but yes, we did." As they gathered themselves, preparing for the long journey back to the extraction point, Aaron felt a deep sense of pride. They had faced an enemy that outmatched them in nearly every way, and yet they had held their ground. The Asliel would remember this day, and so would he. Lana moved to Aaron's side, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "You think they'll come back for another round?" Aaron's gaze lingered on the empty jungle, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe, but next time, they'll know exactly who they're up against." With one final glance at the battlefield, Aaron led his team into the jungle, leaving behind the echoes of their hard-fought victory, a testament to the resilience and resolve of Deathworlders.